You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the old Options Insider Radio Network, where we move beyond our traditional realm of your Apple and your SPY and your Tesla options. We explore what's going on in the exploding world of crypto. A lot of that explosion going on since our last show. So we have a lot to get to. Looking forward to it. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the optionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever exciting, at least we hope so, Options Insider Radio Network, reminding a lot of you folks come to our network who are new to the world of options through the lens of this program in particular, the Crypto Rundown program. So, if you're not subscribing to the full network, you're missing out. Usually a couple of shows hitting you a day, particularly for a lot of you out there who are maybe newer to the world of options. Some of these terms we're going to throw around here on the show may be a little bit confusing to you. Check out our Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook radio shows. Those are really designed to get you up to speed in the world of options. And of course, wherever you find our content, keep rating and reviewing. It really does help the legion of new listeners. I mean, this network has been around for 14 years. It's scary to say it out loud, but it has been. But it's great to see so many new folks coming in, particularly through the world of crypto these days. So keep rating and reviewing. It really does help those new folks discover the content. Of course, keep those comments and everything else, questions coming too. We do love to hear from all of you guys and gals out there. Let's see who we're hearing from today. It is time to roll out the Crypto Hot Seat.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Hot Seat, the portion of the show where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of crypto derivatives and indeed beyond, and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. And next up is a newcomer to the program and indeed to the network. She is RAFAELLA BARALDO, the co-founder and CEO at Pods. RAFAELLA, welcome to the Crypto Rundown program.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I do believe you have the distinction of being the first guest on the network from Uruguay. So congratulations. A nice feather in your cap to kick off your first appearance here on the Options Insider Radio Network.
That's true. I'm based in Uruguay, but I'm originally from Brazil.
Oh, well, there you go. We've had one or two Brazilians on over the years there, but never one from your current neck of the woods. Well, let's get to it. You're a newcomer to the network, so let's start there as we want to do with all of our first timers. Why don't you give our audience a little bit of an overview of your background in the crypto and indeed financial space, as well as what it is you do at Pods?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career in traditional finance in Brazil. So I started working for the sales and trading desk at Barclays, and then I moved for family offices and hedge funds, and then finally in a trading desk for the largest bank in Brazil and Latin America called Itaú BBA. I was there in this trading desk where it was the dream of my life to work there at some point. And when I got there, I realized that there in the credit and structured products trading desk, that the technology and the infrastructure around the banking system was really archaic, and that has to happen at some point. That it had to happen, a big change in that infrastructure. So when I noticed that, I still was passionate about economy in finance, but not exactly how it was done back then. So I decided to shift my career completely to technology in search for what would be the technology that could someday make a better infrastructure for finance. And well, it was a long story short, I ended up finding blockchain and crypto. I tried to open a cryptocurrency exchange in Brazil in 2018, 2017. It didn't work. But anyway, I still got involved in crypto and DeFi. I started getting involved with Ethereum back then in 2018. And then I guess it's where it all started, my relationship with Ethereum more closely. So then basically I met a really nice team from a blockchain company that wanted to open an office in Brazil. They invited me to do that. I opened the office. They started shifting to DeFi. We had a team in Brazil. And that was like early 2019 when they gave us this really amazing task of finding everything we could about DeFi, everything that was coming out. So we had an amazing learning curve back then about all the DeFi protocols that were coming out. And I guess at that point, my friends there, my colleagues at this company, we really wanted to build something. We were just like really ready to build something. And so we started building side projects. And I guess that's where we got closely to the option space. We first started doing a side project that was like an option for hedging your DAI exposure. I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with DAI, which is a stable coin, completely decentralized. And back then they were doing an update of the multi-collateral DAI. That was super fun. We loved it. And I guess that from there, we started expanding the idea of keep working with hedging. And today, this is what Pods is here for, right? So we want to allow hedge to be something completely easy, in that anyone in the world could be able to access a hedging solution for their portfolio, starting, of course, with crypto. So right now at Pods, this is our main goal, to make hedging something really easy.
I like the idea of taking a fresh new look, a fresh new take on the options scene here for ETH. A lot of it centralized on DEREBIT, but beyond that, not a heck of a lot going on out there. So this is certainly interesting. I know a lot of our audience certainly interested in the DeFi and ETH realm as well. So let's get into a little bit. You kind of mentioned your Pods platform, how it's designed around hedging. So what are these pods and how do I use them to hedge my ETH portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that our main goal is to get somewhere where someone could just buy an asset and this asset already has a protection with it. But as of now, we are building the infrastructure for this. So we have this little piece of the put options. So we created an entire infrastructure for an options protocol. And this options protocol basically allows option sellers and options buyers to just go to a certain options AMM and buy or sell options from this AMM. There's also a third user in this space that is the liquidity provider. So there's a different concept in our AMM that we can explore later if you guys want to. But it is possible for a liquidity provider to provide liquidity in options tokens, for instance, and allow people to buy hedge from or against this pool.
Let's just clarify that for our listeners. AMM, of course, automated market maker for anyone out there who is confused by this. Now, that's a term we've heard discussed on the show in the past. We've discussed with various players out there who have attempted to devise these for different platforms and different underlyings, not just ETH. It's a challenging task because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do, obviously, is aggregate and source liquidity. How challenging has that been for you? And how do you source this liquidity? How many market makers are you pulling from for this AMM for pods?
Yeah, I guess you got straight to the point. Is extremely hard. So I guess that right now our model is very different than traditional finance. So someone could look at us and I don't know, basically laugh because we have like fully collateralized options with physical settlement on European options. So basically you need upfront on the seller side or on the liquidity provider side, 100% of the liquidity of this operation. So at this point, to be honest, we are really going forward in the route of making sure that the protocol is going to work as we want it to, in that all the security measures that we could have are in place before we on board a bigger sum of money from market makers. So we're still in this phase of development of testing and making sure that everything is going to work properly. But moving forward, we are for sure in conversations with market makers.
You said you're still dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the platform, but theoretically in the near future, someone will be able to come to you, a user, a customer who has an ETH portfolio right now, and they'll be able to come to you and effectively purchase, like you mentioned, a European style put option on their ETH portfolio. That's effectively the plan, right?
Exactly, precisely. So anyone from anywhere without a QIC or anything could just connect to their wallet and buy options straight from the AMM.
And why go the European route? Was there a reason behind that?
No, actually, we do. Our code is already settled. You can use it with American options as well. But the engine for pricing is currently using Black-Scholes. And if we were to use American options, we would have to change some things in the pricing as well. So we recommend, like, anyone could just basically start their own option series out there. So we recommend people to, at this point, use European options since our pricing is most suited to European options instead of American options.
Keep the calculations as simple as you can in the early days. Why add extra wrinkles and extra variables if you don't have to? Now, you've mentioned hedging a lot. I imagine that's your primary use case. You're not really designing this to be a trading platform yet, but more of someone coming in and primarily buying these pods, or do you anticipate a kind of a back and forth and actually sellers coming in too?
Yeah, so the way that our AMM works, basically, it is at all times updating the price and updating the price based on what happens in the platform. So if there is a strong demand for buying options, the price will reflect this. And there will be, or there should be, an opportunity for option sellers that are actively market makers or arbitrageurs to look at the price and say, well, I think that this is mispriced. I think this is more expensive than it should be. And they could sell options back to the AMM at that price that they're looking at. And then like just bring the price lower based on the information that this trade is going to pass along to the AMM on its next trades. So it is possible for other people like option sellers to be at all times looking at what is happening to the option price and effectively be trading against it.
Now, do you plan to eventually be disseminating effectively an options chain, a series of prices for ETH options at different strikes, or is it going to be more of an RFQ? A listener comes to you and say, or a user comes to you and says, I would like an option on, let's say, the 2000 strike at the end of the year in ETH. How's it going to work from that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now what we do is that like each option series that we are calling it series for a combination of aspects. So like the maturity, the strike price, the asset pair, the collateral type, all of this, it's bundled in an option series. In each pool, each each option series is actually one combination of those parameters. So it really, a user that is interested in buying an option should find first one of those options live up and running so that they can buy hedge from one of those options. Is not really so loose that people could just say what strike price they want, and there will be liquidity for that, at least not in our V1.
Obviously, it's still very early days, but what can listeners expect right now? Obviously, one of the challenges we've seen for a lot of these venues out there that are trying to provide liquidity is in the early days, it's kind of hard to keep the spreads pretty tight because the liquidity isn't there yet. So what are you expecting from a spread perspective? What kind of costs should listeners expect coming in there trading between the bid and the ask?
Well, I guess that honestly, this depends a lot on the situation of each pool and what is happening and what are the trades that were happening. It can vary from what is happening and what is the current position of the pool. Our model is very unique in that sense. But one thing that it's important to keep in mind is that the initial costs for providing liquidity to a pool like that, at least on mainnet right now, are kind of high, especially because our contracts can be a bit heavy. So one thing that we did for improve the capital efficiency of the positions that hold collateral is allow for interest-bearing tokens as collateral, so people can just use their funds from Aave, like ADAI or AUSDC, that is already generating some interest as collateral when they're selling, like writing and selling an option, or writing and adding an option as liquidity to the AMM. So this will increase their overall yield during this option period.
And you mentioned your contracts are pretty heavy. So what are we talking about from a contract specs perspective? What's the multiplier? What are the specs of your contracts here on pods?
Well, I don't know if I can, if I know exactly the numbers to tell you, but I guess that based on current gas perspectives, it could cost like $100 per one transaction, which is pretty costly.
I mean, contract size-wise, are we going to line up to, let's say, what's trading on Deribit and things like that? Or are these going to be more of a bespoke, more sizable type contracts?
No, you meaning, okay, you're talking about the contract of the option. No, actually, you can buy a fraction of options. So you can buy whatever size you want. I was talking about the smart contracts, the size of the smart contracts in the Ethereum blockchain. But actually, the options are fractional, so you can basically buy just one tiny bit of an option.
Fractional options, we've been debating that, whether that will come here to the U.S. Obviously, in the U.S. here, we have a very robust clearing and counterparty system. It'd be kind of hard to make that work from a fractional perspective. But it sounds like you're ahead of the game there. You're already diving into fractional ETH there, Rafaela.
Yeah, well, exactly. In about the clearing aspect of it, since currently our options are fully collateralized on blockchain, so in non-custodial on blockchain, the clearing aspect of it gets questionable. I guess it becomes questionable for this current technology.
Yes, the counterparty issue is one that the crypto space still has to deal with. Is there still a little bit of concern about counterparty risk on your neck of the woods there, Rafaela?
Well, yeah. So the way that we are approaching counterparty risks in DeFi, I guess more general, not just for options, is actually a smart contract risk, right? Because if you know how much collateral there is there, and for instance, one thing that is very different in our world and from traditional world is that here we can't really margin call someone. We can say, hey, can you put more margin? It doesn't work like that. So we have to basically either liquidate someone's position, or we have to ask them to put 100% of that position. So right now, as I mentioned, we are doing the other route of asking for 100% of the position. So the risk of counterparty is actually diminished by the risk of smart contracts. So the risk that we're talking about here is either the smart contract going to work by the end of the day and give you the money that you're entitled to in case of an exercising or something, or is it not going to work? Because the money is there. You see, you can actually go there and check it on the blockchain. Yes,
it is fully collateralized. You would hope it would make its way to the appropriate parties. But again, at the end of the day, that's what I know a concern for a lot of people, particularly ones who are coming from the U.S. markets who are used to having another entity standing behind their trades. Well, you mentioned pods is still kind of in the early days. What can we expect going forward? What's the time frame? When can we start to expect some volume hitting the platform here, Rafaela?
Yeah, well, I hope really soon. So right now we are beta testing on Kovan in Mumbai, which is Polygon testnet. Polygon, for the ones that don't know, is a kind of a sidechain that allows for a scalability solution. We're going to launch on mainnet fairly soon. I guess that in less than 2 months, we should be live on mainnet, on both mainnet and Polygon. And we're, as I mentioned, the biggest risk that we have so far is basically the smart contract risk and security risk. So we're going to start slowly and small. That might not sound super exciting, but it may be the safest thing that we could do. Regardless of how many audits we do, there can always be a bug or a problem. So we're going to start with a guarded launch, and there will be a plan for increasing the cap that is held in the contract over time. But we will, of course, give more information about this as time goes, and we want to make it really the safest we can. So I guess that, I don't know, maybe by next semester, we're going to be able to see some more volume hitting the contracts.
I like that. Next semester. Spoken like a true academic there, RAFAELLA. But I know listeners are going to ask too, so I'll just preempt them now. What about adding the other side of the options chain down the road? What about trading calls sometime in the future? Is it always going to be exclusively focused around puts?
Well, so actually when we designed the protocol, we did it in a very modular way. So we are ready for call options as well. And I guess that in the future, we're going to listen to users and see what is it that they want to trade more. And if they ask for calls, we're ready to do that.
I like it. And if our listeners are interested, they want to learn more, maybe kick the tires and stay informed on the latest updates on pods for themselves, RAFAELLA, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, absolutely. Join our Discord. Our Discord is where we're very close to the community and listening to their feedback closely and changing based on what they say and ask for. So I guess that Discord is the best place. And then obviously Twitter, so Pods Finance on Twitter, and in our blog, we have been posting a lot of content there.
And is the Discord just Pods Finance, or what's that one called?
So the Discord, yeah, it's Pods Finance, but there is a link for invite. If I want, I can share it with you later and you can add to the link.
There we go. We'll let listeners know there, so you can check them out for yourself. Listeners, pods.finance, a place to go online. Of course, we'll also share the Discord. You can find the links there for the Discord on the website, as well as Medium and Twitter and everything else. And RAFAELLA, I want to thank you for coming on and squirming your way through our crypto hot seat. Hopefully it wasn't too uncomfortable for you today. And this is certainly an interesting approach to options out there in the DeFi space. And we'll pay attention to this and we'll look forward to seeing some volume hit that platform very soon, RAFAELLA.
Absolutely. Me too. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure indeed. We always love to see new takes on options in the crypto space from around the world. And now it's time for us to keep on rolling. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down the action out there in the world's leading digital asset, aka Bitcoin. And some action we had over the course of the past week, particularly over the course of the past 24 hours out there. You know, coming off the end of our last show, we were still north of the 60,000 handle. We were almost 60,100, or very close to it on our last show. And we saw some interesting new ebbs and some interesting new flows. In particular, it flowed all the way up to nearly 65,000, 64,863, setting a new high out there in Bitcoin land. And of course, we saw it get drubbed right back down to not quite breaking the 50,000 handle, but getting pretty close to it there over the course of the past week. So just a tumultuous, topsy-turvy week out here. Coming into showtime today, we saw Bitcoin right around, not quite 56,000, 55,700. Actually puts it down about 4,400 points from our last show. Got as low, a little bit shy of 53,000 handle, about 52,829 out there. So some pretty wild swings. 12,000 handles almost exactly over the course of the past week. So if you're looking for a little vol, we got a little bit more vol since our last show, though perhaps not quite as much as you might have expected. On our last show, we were talking about, this Bitcoin vol is getting comparatively anemic. It was about a 71% on our last show. We were talking about, will it stay down here? Will it get some pop? It got a little bit of a pop intra-show, spiked to about 85.25%. That was during the height of the madness yesterday over the course of the past 24 hours. Now it has retreated yet again, back down to about 73.5%. So it's up about 2.5% over the course of the week. So it's starting to have a bit of a feel, like I said on the last show. People always compare Bitcoin to gold. They call it the digital gold. From a vol perspective right now, it's starting to behave kind of like gold vol did not too long ago, where it would kind of languish at a level for a while, then it would get a pop, but that pop would be very short-lived and it would come back down. I never thought I'd be saying this about Bitcoin vol because it seemed like the sky was the limit for that, but right now it seems like it wants to hang out here in this mid to low 70s range, and any near-term pop is going to be short-lived. So interesting to see. Maybe we are in a structurally new regime for Bitcoin volatility, in which case maybe those days of the triple digits will be gone for a little bit. Or perhaps it is the calm before the storm, and next time it'll spike and actually stay up there. But for the last month and change, every spike we've had has been very short-lived, which again is kind of surprising and not exactly what I expected coming into this month from a Bitcoin volatility perspective. Let's look at the SKEW, see what's going on out there. Our last show, it was about a 10. And then it moved quite a bit. It dropped to -5 yesterday. So, a 15-point swing as Bitcoin was swinging wildly as well. And coming into today, it's almost even right now. It's about 3/4 of a point in the negative direction right now, but effectively at an even level out there, which is, again, showing some interesting movement in the wings out there. And if you don't understand what any of that means, listeners, again, check out our Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook radio programs here on the network. Go back to the archives of this show as well, where we talk to the folks from Genesis and other analytics platforms about what those SKEW metrics actually mean. By the way, of course, you guys can check all this out for yourselves. Speaking of Genesis, gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. Given what's going on out there these days, I have to imagine you want to check out some analytics on these things. So gvol.io is the place to go to begin that journey. Let's look at the journey here from an OI perspective. Again, I love that hourly updates on OI in the crypto realm. They'll never get old to me, at least until we have it on, let's say, things like Tesla and Apple and Amazon as well, which doesn't seem like it's happening anytime soon. The hourly OI on our last show was 185,000. It's bumped up a bit since then, up to about 203,000. So a little bit of action out there from an OI perspective. Now, notional volume wise, how much notional value is actually open in that open interest? That's interesting as well, because it's effectively unched from our last show, about 11 billion on the big platform, which is DEREBIT. If you add up all the other ancillary platforms, a little bit north of 12 billion total notional volume outstanding. But it hit a much higher level, hit about 14.5 billion aggregated across all the platforms in between our last show here and now. So we did see an increase pretty aggressively in the notional OI. Then, of course, it came off as we saw that aggressive movement out there in Bitcoin. Calls versus puts. This has been an interesting part of the tale of late as well. We were talking on our last show. It was pretty much even. It was calls and puts were pretty much 1-to-1, very close. Puts outnumbered a little bit by calls. Coming into today's show, that lead has picked up again for the calls. There's 113,000 calls open right now. It's up about 16,000 contracts from last week versus the puts at 98,000. They're only up about 5,000. So the calls have regained their distance. I'm guessing some of that rally to new highs attributed to that. You think the sell-off might have added a little bit more puts, but right now, at least, the calls getting a little bit more distance from the puts, even though it still is very close. 98,000 versus 113,000 on the calls side. Overall, options volume, you might have imagined this was a pretty active week, and you would be correct. It was a very active week. In fact, our recent high we hit out there for overall notional volume was 2 billion on DEREBIT. That was on March 24th of last year. Well, we hit that number again this week. And then we hit it again and again and again. We hit 2 billion multiple times this week, on the 13th, on the 14th, on the 18th. So 2 billion seems to be the new threshold for high volume out there on DEREBIT. And we hit it again multiple times this week. So extremely active week, probably one of the most active weeks we've ever seen. We've never seen a multiple 2 billion notional volume week here, let alone 3. So a lot of action. And again, we've had 12,000 plus point swing in Bitcoin intra week. So it's going to generate a little bit of paper out there. Let's look at the paper where it's lining up, where you folks are trading right now from a monthly perspective. First, April, the front month, the big dog still 64,000 contracts are open in April right now. It's up 11,000 from last week. That compares to June. Like we've said, crypto likes a quarterly, but right now in Bitcoin, it's all front month. It's all April. June's only 44,000 by comparison. That's up a paltry 3,000. And again, that isn't entirely surprising. These swings have been very dramatic. When those are happening, when things are moving around fast and furious, you want a lot of high gamma, high bang for your buck type contracts. And that's going to come in the front month as opposed to going out to June. That's no doubt why we're seeing such an interest in the April contracts right now. Then we have DEES bringing up, actually looks like May is number 3, just barely edging out DEES right there. Both of them around, looks like around 25,000 or close to it. Contracts open there. So quarterly is getting edged out by some nearer term action here in Bitcoin. In terms of action, let's see where the size positions are right now. What options are you folks actually trading right now? And it's the 50,000 strike, still number 1 with about 16,700 contracts open. That's up almost 2,000 contracts from last week. So as we got away from the 50,000 strike, then came roaring right back close to it. That 50,000 strike picked up net about 2,000 contracts out there, followed by number 2. Again, this one seemed so outlandish not too long ago, but now it isn't that far away. It's the 80,000 strike with 15,800 contracts. That gained about 2,000 contracts this week as well. So new opening paper on the 80,000 strike. We've been saying that pretty much week after week for a while now, and I'm sure that rally up to nearly 65,000 helped attribute to some of that out there. But 80,000 strike, clear number 2 out there right now. Then we got 60,000 strike, number 3. Mixing up the strikes a little bit this week, which is kind of interesting. 15,600 of those. That's up about 3,600 from last week. So that's now moving into the top 5 as well. Number 4, the 40,000 strike. That's about 13,000 contracts open. That's pretty much unched from last week. And number 5 is the 64,000 strike, also fighting its way into the top 10 for the first time with about 10,600 contracts. So a little bit more interesting disparity, a little more interesting smattering of strikes available to us out there. 50,000 strike, 80,000 strike, 60,000, then the 40,000, and then the 64,000 strike for number 5. So interesting stuff. We'll see if that's the case when we get to ETH as well, or if still those 400 and 320 strikes are holding down the fort over there. In terms of options at CME, you may have heard on the TWIFO program last week, it was a pretty decently active week there. I think they had about 280 or so contracts on the tape as of Thursday. That's not a ton when you compare it to what's going on over there at DEREBIT. From their perspective, that's a decent amount. The busiest day last week was about 80 contracts out there. Again, that's a 5X contract. So getting back to what our guest referred to as a very hefty contract. That's a very hefty contract. But it's starting to do more paper, starting to pick up out there, which is good to see. Of course, the soon to be listed micro contracts out there, I think will probably bring a little bit more interest there as well. The futures side, again, a pretty light week. Most days were around 8,000 contracts. A few days had a few thousand more or a few thousand less, but pretty much around 8,000 a day this past week, which given how much action there was in the underlying is actually not that much. We've seen days with much more volume over there at CME. And of course, a lot of the action happened over the weekend, which of course the CME contract not trading over the weekend. So interesting stuff afoot. Not a lot of interesting stuff afoot over there on BAKKT right now. The BAKKT volume bot reporting about 907 contracts going up over there on the BAKKT monthly futures. That's effectively unched from last time we talked about it. And again, a far cry from their high of 18,718 back on September of 2020. All right, there's been a lot of action, a lot of talk, and a lot of interest in the altcoin realm as well. So without further ado, let's get to it.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe. We can almost start here these days. There's so much action, so much interest in so many of the different altcoin out there. Let's start breaking down the top 10. A lot of action in this as well. Remember, take these overall market caps with a grain of salt, but the rankings have some merit to them. Number 10 out there, Bitcoin Cash, almost 17.5 billion. Number 9, Litecoin, about 17.6 billion. Number 8, it's Polkadot, 33.3 billion. Number 7, Cardano, 39.1 billion. Number 6, it's Tether, 48, pretty much even billion out there. Number 5, Dogecoin, 50, almost 51 billion. And in fact, that was not the high for Dogecoin. Since our last show, we saw Doge just roaring on up. It actually usurped XRP. XRP has already had its own good run out there, but Dogecoin actually usurped XRP as the 4th largest cryptocurrency on the planet this past week. That's when it got its market cap up to about 54 billion. Of course, you've seen the headlines. You know what's going on. Doge has been on a tear of late, 340% over the course of the past week. And from the start of the year, it's just been just extraordinary, the movement out there. Of course, everyone talks about many leading crypto assets are a joke. They don't have much fundamental value behind them, if at all. But Doge is quite literally a joke. It's the one crypto that was started as a joke. And yet this movement we've seen of late, there's 54 billion worth of market cap now behind it. That's moved beyond the joke realm, and it's maybe starting to get a little bit scary. Of course, April 20th, aka 420, people are saying that's now the unofficial Doge day. So that's where we are as a market, as a society, call it what you will. We're rallying a joke cryptocurrency to coincide with the 420 quote unquote holiday out there. I don't know. It's people can trade what they want, and certainly there's a lot of interest in this. I would just caution anyone out there who's getting heavily into Doge. This is an asset that can quite literally go to zero and was started as a joke. So as long as you go into it with that in mind, I'm not going to be the get off my lawn guy. I think there's room for everybody out there in these markets. But a lot of people also in the crypto space, we hear from them all the time, they get a little bit upset that, let's say, projects with a lot more impact on society than Doge can't get a lot of attention or get anywhere near the traction that a joke cryptocurrency can. And so it depends. If you're a big Doge holder out there, hey, more power to you. It's working out right now, just as long as you have a plan to hit the exits when, or perhaps if, this thing starts to turn. Because again, there is no underlying value there. It's all on the goodwill and what the next guy after you will pay for it. And so as long as you have a plan for that, you're not putting, let's say, the kids' college fund, all of it in Doge. Yeah, it's just been fascinating to watch the movements out there. Of course, XRP now regaining its, gaining its 4th spot to 862.5 billion. XRP's had a good run as well. Number 3, Binance Coin. So XRP actually losing the number 3 spot to Binance Coin, which is now 77, almost 78 billion. Number 2, of course, ETH, right around $250 billion in market cap. And number 1, the big dog, Bitcoin, 1.043 trillion. It's still hard for me to say that with a straight face again, but hey, that's where we are these days. Let's get on out to ETH land. And coming into showtime, we're seeing ETH, after all the movement over the course of the past week, not that far away from where it was on our show last week. Last week, we were 2140. Right now, it's 2169. It's up about 29, almost 30 handles from where it was last week. It hit as high of about 2282 over the course of the past 24 hours. That was just in the last 24 hours. And of course, over the course of the past week, it got as high as 2538. So a nice little run there for ETH, even though it has given a good chunk of that back. Vol-wise, you might imagine a little bit of vol evolution out there, and that's what we saw. Even though net on the week, not much change. Last show, we were at 87.5% vol, which, you know, historically for ETH is also very low. They've been well north of triple digits for most of the recent lifespan of ETH. It spiked to almost back in the triple digits yesterday. 96.25 was the high of the vol over the course of the past week. And we pretty much, like Bitcoin, gave all that back. We're pretty much unched on the week now, back down to about 87.25. So a quarter of a point difference from last show to this show, net on the week. So ETH vol, Bitcoin vol, they seem like they want to stay at this level they are right now, even though there have been some aggressive movements. When that vol comes in, it comes right back out. That is fascinating and not a development I thought we'd see at least this soon out there in the major cryptocurrencies out there. SKEW, a similar story to what we saw out there in Bitcoin. Our last show, it was 14.25 in the positive direction. in the last 24 hours even, we've seen massive evolution in the SKEW out there. It swung as low as -6 and as high as +5 over the course of the past 24 hours. That's a huge swing in there as we're seeing demand for puts and demand for calls swinging all over the place. And right now it's about a -4.25. So you're actually talking from a +14.25 on our last show to -4.25 this show. That's a pretty big move in ETH SKEW. And again, hard to argue that isn't merited given what we've seen out there. Also, from an action week, from a notional volume week, this is far and away the most active week we've seen in quite some time. Our previous high was back on February 23rd, 395 million worth of notional going up on DEREBIT. Last week, we beat that. 448 million went up on Thursday, the 15th. Of course, we saw about 377 million on the 14th, 344 million on the 13th. So just an extremely active week. You go back not too long ago, back to, January or even December, you're talking about barely 100 million worth of notional going up. So the ETH marketplace has evolved and indeed exploded, and particularly over the course of the last few months out there. So 448 million looks like a new high for ETH out there until, who knows, until next week, and we see what else is on the horizon out there. Open interest perspective, we got 783,000 open on the call side. That actually isn't much change from last week. It's only up about 8,000. We have seen a big change on the puts, though. 574,000 puts are open. That's up 44,000 from last week. So unlike Bitcoin, which had calls edging away a little bit from the puts, right now, puts starting to catch up. Calls still leading the dance by a considerable margin in ETH, but puts getting a little bit more love this week, or at least a little bit more OI, to the tune of 44,000 out there. Hourly open interest, about 1.28 million. On our last show, come into today's show, about 1.35 million. In terms of, again, with that notional OI is lining up right now on our last show. Again, all that's notionalized pretty much. It's all DEREBIT. There's not much to be found on the other platforms, unlike Bitcoin. Notional value of the OI last week, about 3 billion. This week, about 4 billion. So ticking up quite a bit. Looks like it got even higher, up to about 4.25, 4.5 billion or so in between shows as well. So a lot of action, a lot of notional volume trading out there in ETH land right now. Let's see where the action is from a monthly expiration perspective. A little bit of a different story for ETH than it is for Bitcoin. As we say, a lot of cryptos like a quarterly, and ETH is fulfilling that again this week. The number one monthly expiration out there right now is June with 366,000 contracts. It's up about 10,000 from last week. April is a pretty distant number two with 286,000 contracts, even though that is up. It's up about 19,000. So even though we've seen a lot of tremendous swings in ETH over the course of the past week, we haven't seen April able to overtake just the sizable position that's there in June. And then DEFI is number 3 with 231,000, up about 9,000. So it still is primarily the quarterlies where the action is out there in ETH right now. Let's look at a strike perspective. I was joking earlier, can the 400 and 320 strikes be unseated? Well, not this week, listeners. The 400 strike still number 1 with 63,000 open. That's pretty much unchanged from last week. The 320 strike number 2, 62,000. Again, unchanged. Then we go to one of the more relevant strikes on our list, certainly compared to the 400 and 320 strike. The 1600 strike has been holding it down for a while as kind of the only relevant strike in the top 5 here. That has about 57,000 contracts open. That's actually down about 4,000 from last week. Then we have some more strikes kind of percolating to the surface this week, which is kind of interesting. The 2240 strike, number 4, with also 57,000 strikes. So it's 57,000 open. So it kind of tied with the 1600 strike for number 3 there. And then rounding out our top 5 here, we have the 2880 strike. Easy for me to say. The 2880 strike with 55,750 contracts open. So we're starting to see more relevant strikes fight their way into the top 5 here. Hopefully something will eclipse the 400 strike soon, and we could stop talking about these nonsensical strikes here. Again, looking at some of the other action out here, Ripple had an interesting run over the course of the past week, but it's actually net down since our last show, down about a nickel. And Bitcoin Cash up 260 points from last show. Bitcoin SV up 48. And we already talked about the madness that is Dogecoin. What are your thoughts? You guys out there slinging Doge? Hit us up. Let us know. Meanwhile, speaking of your questions, it's time to get to some of those right now. Time for your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to your questions. Interesting ones here. First from Nez. Everyone wants to know about XRP options these days. Nez is the latest to ask. They say, do you think this rally in XRP will lead to options being listed soon? Not yet. Like I said, we're at about $1.30, $1.35 out there right now. Go look around in the traditional options world and see how many $1 stocks have a ton of options on them. The answer is not many. So you need to usually have a little bit more going on in the underlying first in terms of price action and price level to really merit options activities. Right now, the stock or the underlying really is still extremely cheap. Most people would consider that an option in and of itself out there. So remember, we had the highs a few years ago of around $3.50 or getting close to the $4 range. If you can blow through that, if you can get it beyond $5, I would think that would make options a little bit more palatable. Then you could have a 2.5 strike. You have a 5 strike. Maybe you put a 4 strike in there. You have some strikes to play with. Right now, you don't even really have any strikes. You have the 1 strike, the 1/2 strike, the half strike. It's not really that suitable yet for options out there. If it continues this run, if this is the new era of XRP and if it has shaken off the ghosts of its past and the lingering SEC issues and the concerns about dilution and everything else that dogged it for years out there and kept it languishing in the 20 to 40 cent range. If it has finally shaken that off and it's got a new upside regime ahead of it, then options will come. And let's all hope that gets to that day. I mean, once we get north of $5 and maybe even $10, then of course you could see a robust options market pick up on that. But right now, $1.30, $1.35, it's hard to say this is the dawn of a new era of options. Certainly much more palatable than it was at 40 cents, but not quite there yet. Needs a little bit more action, a little bit more price action, really, before I think I could say XRP is going to be the next big thing on DEREBIT or pick your platform out there. Next up, speaking of approvals and options and things, we got Marcus wants to know, will the approval of a Bitcoin ETF in the U.S. also lead to the approval of Bitcoin options exchanges like DEREBIT to trade in the U.S.? Well, I hope so, Marcus. From your lips to the regulator's ears, it would be strange if they approved a Bitcoin ETF and yet those other venues still remain verboten here in the U.S. That said, it doesn't seem like an unlikely proposition to me. I could easily see a scenario where a Bitcoin ETF is approved. And then, of course, once that happens, again, that's going to be the watershed moment for everything out there. Then the retail masses will really be able to flock into there. They will have a great proxy, an actual proxy for Bitcoin they can put in their securities account. They're trying to use Mara and all these other mining stocks right now as their securities account proxy for Bitcoin. But this will be an actual ETF that holds Bitcoin, and that will allow them to put that in their securities account. Then that will very much be a game changer. And I could easily see an environment where regulators approve that, that takes off. The options will list hot and heavy on that thing. And then you'll have a robust options market on a Bitcoin ETF, while it is still foreseeable that DEREBIT remains off limits. So as strange as that may sound, I could easily see a scenario like that happening where we're all out there slinging options on whatever Bitcoin ETF gets approved, but not directly on the product itself outside of what's going on LedgerX and over there on CME. So I would hope that one approval would mean opening the doors to all those things. But again, I never take anything for granted when it comes to the regulator. So I could easily see a scenario where trading options on a Bitcoin ETF, but not directly through a platform like DEREBIT. All right, everybody. Great questions. Keep them coming. You know where to find us at Options, most of the major social media platforms. TheOptionsInsider.com is also a place you can go. You hit us up directly, questions at TheOptionsInsider.com. It all works. It all gets to us. Smoke signals, if you're here in the Chicago area, we'll probably try to see them all sorts of ways to reach us. Carrier pigeon, you name it. Of course, before we go on, I think our guest, RAFAELLA BARALDO, over there at Pods. Check her out for yourselves. It's just Pods, Pods.finance, Finance, the place to go to learn more. It's an interesting new take on trading options and hedging your ETH portfolio. I know a lot of you out there are trading ETH. You might be interested in a way to hedge it down the road. This one's kind of still on the radar a little bit, but it's still in the early days. But once they get out of beta, it might be interesting to check out. Of course, you can keep an eye out for yourselves. Pods.finance is the place to go. And of course, check out our friends over there at Genesis Volatility, gvol.io. All these analytics we're talking about on the show today, it all comes from them. If you want to kick the tires and light the fires for yourselves, gvol.io is the place to go. And on behalf of our friends over there at Genesis and RAFAELLA and myself, I thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for listening live, for sending in your questions. Keep them coming. Back again tomorrow on the network for Interview Tuesday, more great guests, and then back Education Wednesday. Should be a big one for listeners of this show. We have Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Thursday, we also touch on crypto a little bit on our This Week in Futures Options program. Talk about what's trading over there on CME and what's going on from a crypto perspective. A lot going on last week, as you mentioned on that show. Friday, of course, Volatility Views. Then it all kicks off again on Monday with another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.